Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 86. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. Before we start anything, remember you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and we stream live, as you may mention, on our YouTube channel, Marketing Movies. And with that in mind, please like, share, subscribe. That really helps us a lot. Onto the agenda today, we're going to be talking about CW's Crisis event this year. We're going to be talking about the Joker getting awards. But first, we're going to be talking some gaming news. And one of the first ones is Bioshock, one of my favorite video games of all time. The first one, or even just the general genre and franchise, is one of my favorite. I love the style and things like that. It's finally getting a sequel, a new sequel. That has been kind of confirmed from 2K Games. So it's been over 7 years since Bioshock Infinite, which I think came out in 2013. So it's been a while.
Yeah, it definitely has been. I play a little bit of one. I played most of Infinite. I never played two, but I should probably go back and maybe play all of them. I don't, even though, I don't know if they're really going to be a real strong connection between the game. Mainly because Ken Levine isn't going to be headlining it. It's actually going to be made by a brand new studio, by 2K. But does have obviously I think the new studio is called Cloud Chamber, which kind of sounds like a pretty dope name. But yeah, I mean more Bioshock, I guess. But yeah, like as you said, it has been 7 years, so it's been at least maybe it's been in the pipeline for a little bit, or maybe it's been worked on in secret.
I
Because
think so, because I do remember there was some sort of report, I would probably say maybe 2 years ago, that said, oh yeah, 2K is not letting their franchise go dormant, and I think they referenced Bioshock. But the real question is, because back then I think they said they wanted to make everything multiplayer, which makes no sense for Bioshock to be multiplayer. But I think now we've moved past everything needs to have a multiplayer mode to get money. So they can
Mhm.
definitely do something with single player mode. They'll probably do some sort of microtransaction thing, because it's very hard to do, I guess, a single player game that doesn't make it much money. Because I think with Bioshock, it is very interesting, the story behind it. Obviously, it's referencing a lot of System Shock and those types of games, which once again, my favorite games are Deus Ex and Thief and all these types of games. And essentially, um, the first Bioshock was delayed a bit. The second one was made by a different studio, but still solid. But something like Bioshock Infinite was very much a delayed game over and over again, and it promised a lot of things, and it didn't. They had to cut down a lot of stuff, so they had a lot of lofty ambitions at the start. So I think that's kind of the main problem that Bioshock kind of has, because the series is well known for just taking a lot of time to make. Attention to detail to the scale of things and the rooms, and I really love those games, and I hope that there's a market for it, and I hope that people get hyped up again, because in the end all these worlds are connected. We found that out from Bioshock Infinite, and I just like that gameplay of shooting, having powers, and having this really detailed world, because it's not a first person it is a first person shooter, but it's a little bit more in depth, and I feel like this is something that we've been missing this generation. It's kind of basically in the same things of kind of Fallout and Outer Worlds, but more on the shooting side and less on the RPG side. So
Do
that's
you
why I
think
just
they
can't wait.
might Or do you think they might actually incorporate more RPG mechanics, given that, utilizing RPG mechanics has been a pretty good way to get people to continue to stick with a game, because people like the dopamine hit of, upgrading your character or getting a special ability, like as you mentioned with Outer Worlds, it's essentially Fallout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that game kind of rewards you by every time you level, and you fill that little bar up, and you get this cool little point that you can use to have some kind of ability, given the wide range of abilities that you had in the Bioshock games. I wouldn't be too surprised if they had some kind of component like that in the new game, rather than doing it in the traditional way, which is, oh, you get up to X point in the game and you get Y ability that will help you, defeat certain enemies or complete certain puzzles or whatever. It's like a typical thing in any game in a similar way. Like I've been playing Breath of the Wild, and while that game doesn't have RPG, a traditional RPG system, it does kind of have some mechanics and numbers running in the background in terms of how things function, like in terms of like scaling enemies and then scaling how much damage you do. Like, part of that is all related to things like being able to finding weapons in the game. The more weapons and different kinds of weapons you come across, the more likely your enemies will scale over time. There are some more explicit RPG elements, such as wearing certain armor and stuff, but it's very bare bones by comparison to a traditional RPG system, like as you mentioned, Fallout or your Skyrims, where they'll give you the numbers and they'll tell you what build and what this sword damages and what abilities it has. We're not asking for Diablo 3 or Diablo levels of intricate RPG details, but I could see it going down that
Yeah,
direction.
well, it did kind of have that. It was just very minimal. Like essentially you'd get these powers, sure, but like there would be, I think if I remember correctly, there was alternatives kind of thing. Like, oh yeah, you can
Mm.
get this version that does that much power, or this version that it's basically two different ones. Like one's crowd control, one's more power, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time you could only get them through like money. And obviously you get money through like searching through things, and as well as sacrificing the little sisters to power up. So there was that, but then, yeah, it is kind of minimal, and I don't mind that type of mechanic. As I mentioned before, the types of games that I play, which not many people do, is something like Dishonored and Prey, where Bioshock is kind of in that same vibe of a first person game where maybe they're gonna go down that approach of because Bioshock you kind of, it was open but it was still restrictive, and I'm thinking maybe they'll do something along the lines of what they did, as I mentioned, with Dishonored or Prey or a Deus Ex, in the sense of you can do this 100% stealthy, you can do this lethally, you can hack everything, and you can kind of do that in Bioshock, but it kind of always forces you to attack things. So I think maybe with the new Bioshock they can at least add those types of mechanics, or they'll do something different, because the first Bioshock was, I would say, pretty revolutionary. It originally came out on the PC and the 360, and the way it was kind of done. It's one of my favorite games of the generation of that generation, and even Bioshock Infinite, even though it had lofty goals, it still did some interesting mechanics in the sense of having these skyhook rails where it's like we have this arena, and instead of just walking around, you can also have this extra dimension of attacking people, and kind of like having Elizabeth help you like make cover or give you ammo and things like that. So I feel like whoever's doing the studio at the moment, they need to have that some sort of interesting idea of like, hey, look, these types of games are there. What can we do to add to the extra elements to make it a little bit more interesting or unique, to make it more Bioshock? So I feel like
Oh yeah.
I think that's their main challenge. I think.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, like without having someone like Levine there to kind of headline the game and kind of give the direction, so to speak, it does require them to either try and ape the kind of style that he created or try and come up with a similar, unique one. It'd be interesting to see what kind of setting they go for. Are they going to still have like this kind of retro future feel that the the previous games have, or are they going to go more future, or I don't know, I don't know where you go from, starting in the ocean and then starting in the sky, we're going to be in space, couldn't be on the ground, who knows.
Yeah,
But
like
yeah, it'd be
that thing. They infinite possibilities, right? So, either way,
mm,
I'm just really excited, and I hope that it wows people. Either way, I'm just happy that an old franchise has come back. Hopefully, maybe we'll get an announcement at the Video Game Awards, which I think is happening like tomorrow, or maybe next year at E3. Because definitely, next year with all the next gen stuff, we're gonna hear different types of news when it comes to that game stuff. But
I was actually going to say, it just came to mind because, you just mentioned how it was one of your favorite franchises of the decade or whatever. Because, our top movies and TVs of this year hasn't, that episode hasn't come out yet. But I was thinking maybe we could do also maybe like top movies and video games of the decade, going from 2010 to 2019, also just to kind of cut off the new year, because I've seen a few, people with their hot takes of some of the games, I've been like, oh, I don't know if I'd consider that like, a game of the decade.
Yeah,
What I mean? So
trust me, there have been some really amazing games that have come out this decade. So
well, yeah, that's what I
yeah,
mean.
it's
There's
it's
been a
it's gonna
lot
it's
of
gonna be so
great
hard
games.
because it's like what starts in 2010. So then, like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking 2010. I think we had Mass Effect 2 at that time, or is that 2009? But
Yep.
either way, we had
No,
that.
no,
Like,
no. I think you're correct. Mass Effect, I think, was around then.
it was there. It was like the first Bayonetta I really loved. We basically had like 2 or 3 Zeldas at that time. We've had like Mario games.
True.
We've had like some amazing games. Like you could even say like we had Last of Us as well. We had all these amazing games. So yeah, I think we'll definitely do one of these with the types of podcasts because like it'll be very interesting to kind of debate almost. It's just kind of like this year. What was the best of this year? Because I feel like
I feel like games weren't that great this year. I mean,
well,
like there's been
this year in general has been like
yeah.
whatever. I would say there's some
I
pretty
mean,
good
look,
stuff
there's
at the start of
that
at the
game.
start of the year. It was really great. Like we had Devil May Cry 5 and Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. Like they're either like kind of like remakes or it's like everybody. I think you've mentioned it before on a previous podcast how everybody's kind of holding their guns until the new generation, right? Like they're kind of holding back, what they have in store, and they're gonna just kind of blow their load once all the PS4 and the Xbox 180 or whatever they're gonna call it. They're waiting for those consoles to get released, and then they're gonna release the this game or that game with it, like the new Halo. I mean, they're slowly rolling out the new Halo game. Well, sorry, not the new Halo game, but rather the Master Chief Collection on PC. I don't know if you've seen some of the gameplay and stuff for it, but it looks pretty bizarre and just what I expect from the PC gaming community. There was a video I was watching from like a modded server, and basically everybody had like customized like pistols that were shooting out like vehicles or like giant plasma balls, and they were doing like races with like the banshees and stuff like that. Like it's cool. Like this is kind of what I think everybody wanted from the Halo series, but obviously because they were so restricted about it and they wanted to kind of get everybody on the Xbox rather than on PC. But now you're seeing like just purely from Halo Reach, which I think is the first game that got released, like everyone's playing that game.
yeah, it showed up in the Steam charts, and a lot of people are playing it, and it's like it just shows that like Halo in and of itself, it's the brand is still pretty highly regarded in the gaming community. It's just been like very much just like locked off on the Xbox console.
Well, yeah, I mean they released the first game on PC, and I believe maybe
I think that they released the first one, and then they released the second one, and then never released the third one. I do remember that.
Yeah, I think I kind of remember the second one being released. I never played it.
Because I remember always seeing on the shelf, it's like on Windows Vista. I'm like,
right.
yeah. Remember Windows Vista? Yeah.
Yeah, and so now it's all coming out, and so I'm interested in seeing, whether the interest like remains for the game, because I think it's all kind of releasing out, like at least in America, like I guess 25 USD or something like that, like something like affordable, and where you could either wait for the game, you can either play the games as they release, or you can buy it all as like one big package when it comes out. But I think half the fun is kind of going through it. I haven't bought it yet, but I'm considering because it looks really fun, and it'd be interesting to play it with a mouse and keyboard rather than on a controller. Although I'd probably end up playing it on a controller anyway, because I'm so used to it.
Yeah, I'm so used to jumping A and then like doing particular movements on the Halo on the controllers. But speaking of like semi-exclusive type of games, what we found out is the Final Fantasy VII remake, a game that I've been relatively hyped about. Like I love Final Fantasy; it's one of my favorite franchises, if not like the top 2 gaming franchises that I really love. The Final Fantasy VII remake is basically a timed exclusive on the PlayStation for 1 year until March 3rd, 2021. So there's kind of been a rumor that, like, I think initially when the first kind of big trailer came out, it just said, I think it said something like exclusive or time being or like something like that, where it's like, it had some kind of, marketing wording where it's kind of like, this is exclusive for a certain amount of time type of thing, but we're not going to tell you when. And that was like 3 or 4 years ago. And now, finally, 3 months before the game gets released, they finally released that, yeah, it's going to be a timed exclusive, and basically for 1 year. The real question is, where is it going to go? Obviously, I don't think it's going to go on any Nintendo console. Mostly because Switch. I don't know how it handles the data.
I don't know if the Switch can handle what they have going on for this game. Like this game, is kind of going to be quite graphically.
I played it at PAX this year, the opening bombing mission, and I was even looking at the stuff and the poster and things like that. It's like they got the paws, like the details of the skin of the paws of like Cloud, and you can see like little the fur hairs on his like face. I'm like, details pretty insane. So I'm like, the real question is, this is exclusive, so I'm assuming maybe it'll go on PC. And probably that's the main bet. But the thing is, there was recent news, like there was a recent event like 2 weeks ago that said they were going to finally release all the Kingdom Hearts games, including the collection, onto the Xbox. That's coming out next year. So they're going to find
several years too late.
Well, they released Kingdom Hearts 3, and everyone's like, wait a second, I can't play any other Kingdom Hearts on the Xbox.
That was my kind of justification for it. Like, I don't even have an Xbox One, but if I did, it'd just be like, why? Why would I ever consider buying this game?
It's for people like me who has like older consoles, basically. But
that doesn't make sense either. Because why not? Why wouldn't you just buy it on a PS4?
Because I don't know. Like, why do you have to be tied down to one console?
You don't have a good reason. That's what I'm saying. Like, why not just have it all on the console in which you're going to be exclusively playing your games for? Like, on an Xbox, obviously, you're going to buy your Xbox exclusive games. And on your PS4, you're going to buy your PS4 exclusive games. Like, it's the same thing with Metal Gear. I remember, I wanted to... I think, maybe Metal Gear Solid 4 came out on... I want to say the Xbox 360, unless I'm mistaken.
No, I think there was a collection that had 2 and 3 on the Xbox 360.
No, I think it's 1 and 2, but they didn't have 3.
I think they did have certain, because Metal Gear Solid 1 is the PlayStation 1 version, and that's that you can't really get that on the Xbox. They released 2 and 3, and you can't get 4 because that's just locked on the PlayStation 3.
Okay. So yeah,
I do remember. And then they also released like obviously Phantom Pain on like everything, and that's the 5th one.
But then you can't play Metal Gear. Sorry, yeah, that actually makes sense. So yeah, you didn't get 4 on Xbox, but you got the other one. But then they released 5 on the Xbox One or something. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, why would anybody ever purchase that? Maybe if you're like a console kind of jumper, maybe you've gone from a PS3 to like an Xbox One or whatever, I could kind of understand, like, okay, yeah, thank God I can still play the game. But it just feels like, from a marketing perspective, really stupid. Like, you either keep it exclusive, because it's not going to get you the sales you want anyways. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, maybe people will play Final Fantasy VII on an Xbox a year later. Probably not.
I'll be one of those people. Just for the I'm one of those people who likes to buy stuff at the sole to kind of prove a point. So it's like, because even on that site, I don't know. The point is like, hey, Square Enix, you can make a lot of money if you just like put some of your games on Xbox consoles.
So would you not buy it on your PlayStation 4 then?
Well, I've got still a backlog of games, so I'm pretty sure I can wait 1 year. Because I've been waiting for this whole remake for 20 freaking years or whatever it is. So it's like, I'm okay, but that's the thing. We still don't know if it's going to be PC or is it just going to be on Xbox or both.
It literally says cross-platform. It's going to be PC. They're not going to. And also Square Enix has been capitalizing on the PC market anyway. All their older games that were Final Fantasy VIII recently got a remaster on PC maybe a month or so ago. So yeah, they're clearly having PC in mind, but it makes it. You see, it makes sense from a PC perspective why you would delay it. I mean, Rockstar does it all the time with their games. Like they'll release GTA 5. They released GTA 5 a year after on PC and on I think maybe other consoles, maybe not. But anyway, the point is, on the PC, it was 1 year later. And same thing with Red Dead Redemption, that was released a year later. And, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, well, I would have played it if it was on PC, but since it's not, well, I can wait. But that's because I'm on PC and I can understand that. And also, that's going to come out on and that already came out on the Xbox and stuff. PC kind of gets the short end of the stick all the time just because of rampant piracy. So I can kind of understand why they delay it for PC, but for a console, it kind of is like really weird why you would even consider locking it behind for any temporary sales that you'd get. But then at the same time, what major sales would they get from the market a year later after the game, when they're going to be competing with all these other games that are coming out a year after, right? That's the part that I kind of find a little strange. But hey,
maybe it's a whole thing, because like the whole thing, because even a thing that we really didn't touch on in this part is that everyone always forgets that this is like part one out of however many parts of this freaking remake. Like for all we know, the next remake could be like obviously 2 years from now, 3 years from now, like 6 years from now. The way Square Enix is going, most of the time with its development time. So obviously it's going to be cross platform, like as in it's got to go to the PlayStation 5 or whatever it may be, like the saves. So I have no idea how any of this is going to work, and this is like their whole thing, because like I'm assuming you can't just be like, oh, we're going to release
just be,
and maybe they'll release like little small downloadable content things, and so the next year after that they're like, it's going to be released on these certain consoles with like all the DLC that came out, like little bits of it. I have no idea. Like Square Enix is in a weird position right now.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to be fine. Like, we have cross-platform saving happening with games like Destiny. You've had like semi-crossing over with games like Mass Effect as well, right? It is possible if they wanted to do it. The thing with Mass Effect, it was kind of bare bones. Like they kind of like selected for, did you make this decision or that decision at this critical point in time, right? Like that, there was kind of those things, and maybe like your money, right? Like that was the kind of thing that they kind of took account for something like that. But with games like Destiny, they're able to cross over. Since there was the big move out of Blizzard Activision and onto Steam, there was also a big movement to introduce cross-play and allow you to play on your PlayStation 4 or jump to your Xbox One, or hey, I'm on my PC now, let's play Destiny 2, maybe, is what some people are saying, obviously. Not me. Although, I don't know, it is free now, so I might consider giving it a go, but but yeah, with a game like that, like, that kind of shows that, cross-platform, saves is possible, so I wouldn't imagine it being that difficult from going from a PlayStation, like, and the thing is, the architecture of a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation 5 is going to be much more similar to that of the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4, since they're all kind of moving towards essentially a PC at this stage. There's not really that much, difference between the modern consoles and a PC. A lot of it is kind of, especially if you compare it to something like Nintendo, where they kind of do have their own kind of closed circuit. And also the other thing is exclusives. That's the main thing that will dictate the drive of whether people are going to get certain consoles versus others. This console generation seemed to go on for a lot longer than the last one. But
The last one went on for 10 years.
Last one was quite long, right? Like
last one was like 10 years. It was basically 2000s, like, or like very close to it, because I think it came out like 2005, and then the last console, the launch of like the 360 and everything was like 2013. So everyone's just
but it's like approaching 10 years, right? Because wasn't the announcement of the Xbox One and stuff back in 2010?
No, I think that was 2013, because I do
13, okay.
Because I do remember, 2013 was the point of when we got like all the other
disastrous kind of conferencing.
So I'm assuming like that, and that's gonna basically happen next year. Like they're gonna have some sort of event for both consoles and just be like, and then at E3 they'll do the same thing of like, and it's this price, because they want to do it right close to like Christmas time. next
Well, it'd
year.
be interesting
Basically,
to
this
see.
time next year, all the consoles will be launched. I would assume by now because they want to get in that
Yeah,
Black
oh,
Friday
definitely.
deal and all that stuff.
I mean, don't they usually announce like consoles like mid-year, like the newish consoles like mid-ish year, like for
Yeah, yeah.
the
So like by the
yeah.
time March next year to like June till E3, there'll be all the announcements by then. I would assume, and that's when
It'll
like
be
we'll see
interesting to
whenever
see.
all those delayed games that all these studios are shutting up about. I'm assuming they're gonna be like, here's the new Call of Duty, obviously, or like whatever it may be, and then obviously we'll get a sizzle reel of like, oh yeah, and then we're gonna have like about 2 year generation of 2 year kind of gap of everyone being like, those games that you played on your Xbox One and PlayStation 4, well now we're porting them to on these new consoles but with higher def stuff, and they'll do that
Mhm.
for a while because I remember this generation was plagued full of them. So that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what each major studio has coming out in regards to all of it because I think with something like Xbox's attempt to try and go always online and like no discs and stuff, like obviously it was they jumped the gun a little in regards to what people wanted, and maybe if they try and do it again, I don't think it'll be the correct thing to do either, but we'll see, whether they might just end up being like, there were rumors of there apparently being a discless Xbox that will come out. So there might be almost like the same console, but a different variant. And therefore, it might be in a cheaper price range, which seems like the smarter thing to do. Like, oh, well, this Xbox is coming out $500, but this one without the disc tray is only $400, and that means that hey, you can put that $100 into a brand new game that might be at a discount, and then also maybe have something left over to buy the Xbox Live as well, right? All for 500. So it might be like that might be a direction they might go into. That might be
I'd assume so because
interesting.
hardware is they need the because like this generation that we're currently in, all the consoles launched underpowered, and the previous generation, the 360 and PlayStation 3, they all launched for a good solid year. The consoles were the best that you can actually get game performance wise, and then obviously PC caught up very quickly, but for like 1 year. I do remember, like, the 360 was like, oh yeah, this is the most powerful thing that you can get on the market and play your games on. So I feel like that's what they probably have to do. But obviously, I think the whole Moore's law thing of that technology always doubling, apparently that's not relevant anymore and it's plateaued. So we'll see more things like physics-driven stuff. Instead of graphics increases, there'll be more physics-driven stuff or AI type of components. And I think that's what the next generation is going to be about, moving forward. But yeah, aside from that, we can just move on to our new news, and it's about our non-favorite Star Wars film, The Last Jedi. So tell me all about it.
Well, obviously, there's been some obvious stuff that, such as the confirmation of certain leaks. But obviously, we've kind of talked a little bit about the leaks in our previous podcast, and really, there's nothing really more to say other than the fact that, yeah, like some of those have been confirmed. And if it's the case, I'm probably going to feel quite justified not going in and watching the movie. But if you want to find out spoiler-related stuff, just Google it online. There's plenty of news outlets that are covering it. But one of the big ones, one of the big news that I wanted to mention was J.J. Abrams during a interview with the New York Times was talking about The Last Jedi, and he said, and I quote, in reference to The Last Jedi, being full of surprises and subversion and all sorts of bold choices. Uh, on the other hand, it's a bit of a meta approach to the story, and I don't think that people go to Star Wars to be told this doesn't matter. So this is actually something that he said in an interview. So it's very interesting to see that even JJ, he can't hold back how much he wants to kind of throw The Last Jedi away from anything this new movie has anything to do with. And honestly, I don't blame him. It seems like it's a bit of like, box office poison is usually in reference to like other things in terms of making a film tank in a big way, but
Mm-hmm.
in regards to something like the Star Wars and the Last Jedi, it seems to be that any kind of association with that film will bring down the the Rise of Skywalker even more. So he's kind of being like, that was its own thing. We're doing our own thing, with this movie. What do you think about JJ's response?
I think it's obviously he has to play ball. It's like I got a feeling he doesn't like what happened with the Last Jedi, even though
Uh,
like he obviously has to lie and say like, oh, it's his vision and he had to do whatever he needed to do. Even though I set everything up relatively like semi perfectly, but there was no real plan to begin with. But yeah, so that's why with the leaks coming through about generally what's gonna happen, it is clear from what happened with the Last Jedi is not what like if another director came in and they play ball like JJ, they're like, okay, the story's going to continue here because that logically makes sense for kind of a start, middle, and end type of story. But instead, basically, Ryan Johnson's like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing, and instead of having a normal type of trilogy type of arc, I'm going to just kind of basically just stop it all the way over here. So then the third movie is basically this cobbled up like ideas that are just randomly together. So I'm assuming when JJ says that, he's kind of obviously just saying like, yeah, this is not the way to go. I think there's other reports where it was like the first time he wrote the script, he kind of laughed a bit and he's like, oh wow, I didn't see that was gonna happen. Like I feel and I feel like a lot of people had that idea like kind of moving forward, that they just couldn't voice it though. Obviously because they didn't have the power to do so. So yeah,
yeah. I
I just
mean,
have no hope.
well, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, look, we talked a lot about this on our previous podcast. Obviously, if you're on YouTube, it hasn't been uploaded yet. Hopefully, it'll be uploaded soonish. But yeah, like a lot of the main characters for this trilogy are leaving. John Boyega kind of seems like he doesn't give a shit about his perception on or people's perception of him in real relation to the Star Wars franchise. Yeah, it just obviously it was poorly planned. Lucas did have a vision for it, but they threw it away, and leading to the point of Kathleen Kennedy even saying that there was no source material, no comics, or 500-page books for us to reference, which still blows my mind that that was something that she unironically said in an interview. But yeah, that's where we are with that movie. Yeah, hopefully we'll see where things go moving forward. With with the Rise of Skywalker, and whether it will do well, it probably will. But I mean, whether it will win fans over, or people saying this is just more of the Last Jedi, or it's still bad, like, which is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that it's going to be better than the Last Jedi, but the bar's so low, and because he has to try and wrap up the story, it will feel either really convenient or rushed.
Yeah,
Um,
from what I've heard
that's
from
how
the leaks, it
that's what I
feels like
feel.
everything's relatively convenient, and it kind of it doesn't have like a satisfying like conclusion to the trilogy, almost, where it's like it doesn't, as I mentioned before, it doesn't have that kind of start, middle, and end of like a hero's journey basically, which is
Mhm.
more or less just Star Wars in a nutshell. And it just basically just
Yeah.
defied that completely. So that's why I feel like this one's just gonna be like, this is like better than the Last Jedi, but like this is not what we wanted either. So I think, because the funny part about this, nothing else has been scheduled for Star Wars after this movie.
Mhm.
Because I'm assuming that wasn't part of the plan, but I think as soon as Solo bombed, I think that's when they started to worry and be like,
Yeah.
oh wait, hold on, all our plans, just wait a while. And we don't have any real confirmation. Like apparently Ryan Johnson's still getting his trilogy, and we don't know anything other than that. And we
That's
don't.
what.
As far as I know, we won't even have a Mandalorian season 2. I'm assuming we will, but
I
I
don't
don't.
think it's confirmed, but we will. Like the
Yeah.
popularity of that shit. You know what the best rumor I've actually heard was for the Mandalorian. I think you'd like this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the theories that people had, like, have you seen the latest episode, episode 5?
Yes.
So you know how there's a scene where there's somebody who looks at the body of the dead assassin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people reckon that that might be Boba Fett, and that's the big
Uh,
reveal. I kind of like that because it's kind of like a twofer in terms of like shock value. It's like, oh, he actually survived the Sarlacc pit, and then the Mandalorian ends up being like maybe season two or whenever. Well, it's going to probably be a season two, season one finale reveal or something, and then it's going to be Mandalorian versus Mandalorian, even though Boba Fett and his father aren't technically Mandalorians, not like native Mandalorian. Although I don't think Mando, I forget the guys. I don't think they've actually revealed his real name in the show. They only really called him by that. But the main character, the Mandalorian, I don't think he's also technically a Mandalorian by birth either. But,
Yeah, I feel yeah, because you get that flashback and things like that, and I get a feeling that like because they always keep on saying you don't see much of your kind around here. Obviously, there's like a missing gap between of like basically the Mandalorians basically got killed, like mass extinction type of level, and there's just a few of them left. So I feel like that, and I feel like that might be a thing, or maybe there's gonna be a whole thing where like if that is Boba Fett, they team up together because they're both Mandalorians. I have no idea.
Well, the in-universe explanation from what I remember is that like Mandalorians, like you're either kind of born into like it's almost like a culture, yeah. So you're either born into the culture, like as in you were born a Mandalorian, or you come from the outside and you adopt the Mandalorian culture. So as I mentioned, like guns being part of their religion, and doing taking care of the young, the younglings is what they, or it's the foundlings rather, is what they call it. It is really interesting that they do call like the younger, in the Star Wars universe, they refer to them as lings, like I find it quite funny, the terminology that's used, but it's also kind of consistent. So that is pretty interesting as well. But yeah, and whereas it's the same thing with, I think, Boba Fett and Jango Fett. Both of them, well, obviously Boba Fett being a clone of Jango, but Jango wasn't a native-born or Mandalorian either. He was kind of described as somebody who like kind of appropriated or stole like the armor and was like a really good bounty hunter and stuff like that. But his armor wasn't like Beskar, for example. That I found out recently, because I remember thinking like, oh, does that mean the cool silver armor that Jango had in the first movie, was that Beskar armor? Apparently not. Not that it would have helped him against Mace Windu chopping his head off.
There's no armor in that area, so.
No, unfortunately not. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if it does end up being the case that the villain is Boba Fett, and then it's almost like these outcast Mandalorians. Well, they're not really. Well, at least Mando isn't, but we'll see where that goes going forward. But things that we actually do know that are kind of probably not going to happen anytime soon is the Akira movie. Now, I don't know if you heard. Apparently, this movie just got delayed to oblivion because Taika Waititi had agreed to doing a fourth Thor movie, which I'm not too surprised about, because obviously, because Love and Thunder, I believe that is the new movie title. Like that was always going to be the priority, and he did agree to do Akira, but it's going to be one of those things that movie is just going to be in development hell, and then even then it's just going to do, in my opinion, as well as the Ghost in the Shell movie.
Which,
it's not going to be
like,
any good.
well, first of all, thank God it's delayed indefinitely. Like, I don't want this to be a movie. I feel like the source material is so really long, as mentioned. I think I mentioned before that it's basically it has to be a TV show. Just to kind of get everything kind of the way it needs to be. And even then, Taika Waititi, while he is a talented director and writer, I do not think he's the right person for this type of movie or this type of project. He obviously he hasn't proven it as of yet, and maybe like he would do a good job, kind of like I forgot his name, but the guy who did Joker, really good job for someone who did comedy straight into something that's not quite comedy. But I'm just very curious of what he would have done with this movie. But I feel like this movie is one of those things where the project shouldn't be made, or if it does, it has to be done in a TV show, and it has to be kind of almost done with someone who understands Akira. Like there needs to be some sort of like consultant and like very much
Well,
following the project, kind of like what James Cameron did with Robert Rodriguez in Alita Battle Angel, where it's kind of like
sure.
I'm basically gonna write exactly what you need to do, and you just follow what I need to do, and it's like okay, you do that. So I feel like
Well,
that's
look,
what needs to happen.
well, look again. I'm not necessarily because what is it? Taika Waititi's mainly done kind of comedy action films, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe just or maybe has it been just comedy? I don't actually remember.
Because
But
aside from doing like Thor, it was just like What We Do in the Shadows, and I think of his recent movies like the Jojo Rabbit Hitler thing, which I haven't watched.
right. Oh yeah, right. That one. Yeah, and so look, I'm kind of not against people kind of going in the direction where they do kind of because we've seen it, right? We've seen traditional directors kind of go outside their usual bubble of films and make kind of really good films. You had it with Todd Phillips actually. What did he did?
He
What is
did The
The Hangover?
Hangover, old school, basically any type of like, early 2000s comedy thing about college people. He basically directed those types of
Yeah,
films.
yeah, and then he's gone and made the Joker, which has basically taken him up in kind of respect. It almost became a like a name among people who like know who like kind of barely know directors like me. I sometimes never know what who's directing what sometimes unless like it's really obvious or it's like a really big name. But now Todd Phillips in my mind, uh, another group of directors that come to mind is also the Russo brothers. They were doing, I think they did Yumi and Dupree. But then now they've done Captain America, Winter Soldier, up to Endgame. They were trusted with all that. So, look, I can definitely see there being some potential that Taika can put in with the Akira movie. But like you said, I think the bigger problem is that there's a lot of content, and to do it kind of justice. Like I mean, even the anime movie cut out a lot from the original. I guess graphic.
They're like
Was
graphic
it
novels, but
graphic
like
manga?
but
Graphic
but
manga?
essentially those graphic novels is basically how like Watchmen, it got adapted to a movie and we think it's pretty good. It's
Hmm.
basically a Watchmen graphic novel, but I think there's eight of them, so eight versions of the
Yeah,
Watchmen graphic novel, and I think that's what you're about to mention. It's such a high
there's a
undertaking
lot of
of.
shit,
There's a lot of stuff in there, and obviously you're gonna cut a few things to kind of make it a little bit more relevant to the story.
and I
But
think
there's a lot
you
of
know what.
stuff, and not only that, but I'm just gonna touch on it really quickly. But trying to do the set design and trying to make everything like dystopian freaking Neo
Dystopian
Tokyo
future,
is
yeah.
gonna be so hard to do and so much money. That's why it's kind of like Alita works in like 2 hours, but like how much money and all that CGI, and then you have to expand that. Like it's a crazy project.
Well, look, you know what I want? I probably want more of like an Akira anime. That would be much more my speed in terms of them doing something. It probably won't happen because like it's such an iconic kind of genre that sorry show that like nobody wants to touch it out of like fear of like fucking it up. I remember like when I went to Japan, one of the places actually had this like it was under construction and it just like and so the area was kind of walled off, but on the wall they had like Akira scenes from Akira, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, that just goes to show how much in the zeitgeist that particular manga slash anime movie is. So maybe they're not going to touch it anytime soon. And much in a very similar way, the West touching it seems even more weirder. Because I feel like we'd fuck it up way more than it being done by actual Japanese people who I don't have like name a good anime like a anime sourced Western movie. I can't.
Uh, I know. Yeah, that's
Like
true. Yeah,
Western,
yeah,
right? Like not,
Western. Yeah, not
like
Japanese made. I think that's the problem because like I think anime in general is very hard to adapt to live action.
oh yeah,
I think it's just
by
because it
design.
yeah
Yeah,
the medium is just so hard to adapt, and I think I've only
I
seen
mean,
Japanese versions of them doing an anime version, and I feel like majority of them are pretty bad.
yeah,
I do know
Dragon Ball Super.
Dragon Ball
Sorry, not Dragon
Super.
Ball
Yeah, oh
Super.
yeah,
Dragon Ball Evolution. Evolution.
Evolution and
Remember
things like
that?
that, and I feel like it is it's just because the sensibilities are very much different. Like if we're, like, you know, there's some debates in the anime community where it's like what Japanese people find funny as a funny anime. A lot of Western people, when they read it, they're just like, I don't get the joke because context is always different. So I feel like it's kind of the same thing when you adapt something like anime. It's just really hard to do in live action, and it's kind of like at a standstill. I got a feeling that, like, yeah, I don't know how to do this project. Maybe get James Cameron on the call again and make him be like, hey, you like this type of stuff? How do you do this? But like, yeah,
Oh, wait. I
it's a
can't
Doom
believe.
thing.
Wait. We actually completely fucked ourselves because we actually both liked Alita Battle Angel, and
No,
that's actually a good adaptation.
yeah, but no, but that's what I'm saying. That's the only one.
That's
That's
the
the
only one that comes to mind. Yeah.
and that's only like this year. So that's why I'm just saying, get James Cameron back and try to figure things out, because
Mm.
he probably knows how to structure it. But like Akira is just so multi-complex that it does not work in a 2 hour or even a 3 hour time frame, unless you
Yeah,
really want to
yeah.
cut out
And
some
I feel like
things.
even if we do it in like a TV show format, it wouldn't even be. It'd have to be like HBO style, right? Like in a sense that it'd need like multiple seasons and a lot of money thrown at it to kind of give it the actual look and feel and the acting required in order to do so. And then even then, like I can imagine people complaining about it, like whitewashing and stuff. Like like that's why I just want the Japanese to do it. Come on, make something, please, before we ruin it.
I got a feeling for some reason Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers had the rights to it for a while, and I think they own it. When it comes to like distribution rights or
Right.
something
So
like.
that's why.
Yeah,
So that's why they want to kind of let's do something with this. We're we're burning
I,
money.
I'd assume so, but I'm not quite sure, because the whole thing of that is, I've heard about this project literally nearly 10 years ago. I think it was like in
Oh yeah.
2010, when Leonardo DiCaprio was right off the press of like Inception. I think he
Mhm.
wanted he was like producing and directing and like starring in the Akira movie. That was
Mhm.
the news in 2010, and everyone's like, "What the hell is this?" And they're gonna send it to Neo, New York. They're gonna change the names of Kaneda and everything like that to like John and stuff. So there was a lot.
Sean.
Yeah. So
God
like
damn it.
there was a lot of stuff, and I was like, what the hell? So I, at least in this modern interpretation, like where we are now, I think
Mhm.
the mid 2000s, 2000 like 15, I would say 16 is when we finally got the last of the really crappy remakes, but there's obviously still coming. But like I feel like a lot of studios, have been like, okay, we learned our lesson, so maybe there's hope, but I'd rather just this not be touched and just leave it alone. Like Akira is good in itself. It's survived long enough. So don't touch things that you shouldn't touch, especially
Well,
in kind
yeah.
of movie stuff.
Well, yeah. Don't touch things you can't actually do anything properly with, which I can imagine them completely destroying this. But
Yeah,
other
well,
film.
that's the thing. Speaking of things that you shouldn't touch, basically, even if it's own directors and writers, we got two announcements for release dates. We got Matrix and The Flash release dates, and I was alluding to is that the Wachowskis should not do another Matrix film. Just
I think like the Wachowskis haven't been doing so well in their kind of newer films, but I think if they have somebody who's like kind of wrangles them and keeps them in line, I could see something good coming out of the Matrix, right? Matrix 4.
mhm.
If they do bring back Keanu Reeves in some capacity, maybe have him be like, the wizened old man who knows the Matrix and stuff, like that would be then teaching the next generation or something. Like they're not having him as the main character, which I don't think they will. But yeah, that movie, is set to be released in May 21st, 2021. And we also have the Flash movie with Ezra Miller, apparently, coming out July 1st, 2022. Um, big leap from, the first instance. Like Justice League, what, came out
17.
2017? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he's getting his first movie 5 years later. Holy shit. Like,
Yeah, it's not only the long time, but it's like, do we care? And the whole thing that we keep in questioning pretty much nearly every single week, it's like, what is the state of the DCEU? Is this a thing? What are we doing with it? What are we doing with these characters? I'm assuming we might know more when Wonder Woman 1984 releases, or like at that time, I'm assuming Comic-Con around that time, they'll release something maybe, because everything is still up in the air of like, is this even connected? But even then, does it really care? Does it really matter? And why are we still using Ezra Miller then? Do we, was it so hard to find the Flash that we have to keep him? I have no idea what they're doing.
Well,
but
I mean,
it's still so far away that they can easily delay it, like what James Cameron does with Avatar. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's the kind of big thing that people don't know. It's like, what's the direction that this cinematic universe is going? You see, I kind of prefer if DC kind of just has something like different actors portraying different characters, but being like, having a different character play Batman and a different character playing Superman, and then retroactively explaining why they look different, like later, like kind of what they're doing with the whole Crisis event that's happening on TV that we'll talk about soon enough. But yeah, like it just seems to be the case that it's just in development hell, and they just don't know. They're just trying to throw things at the wall and see what sticks, right? Like, Aquaman was very successful, and so was Wonder Woman, right? And Wonder Woman's kind of set to do more good things. So I'm looking forward to that movie more than, I don't know, any of the Marvel movies that are coming out. Like, Black Widow kind of looks okay, so I might.
Yeah, but like compared to like Wonder Woman, you're just kind of like, yeah, I'd probably see Wonder Woman over.
Well, I mean,
Widow.
I think the problem with Black Widow movie is that she survived. That's the problem. I think that's the problem with the movie.
She survived, and at a certain time, she also didn't survive. So it's like,
well, yeah,
there's a start, middle, and end in this story.
I think that's the problem when you sometimes do prequels, when there isn't like a big story that is supposed to kind of grip things. Like, if you want to know about, like what happened during the big wizard wars or whatever, or the Harry Potter movies, like you go and watch, what is it? What's that? The new reboot series?
The Fantastic Beasts and all that.
Fantastic Beasts. Like, yeah, you go watch that, and even that hasn't been doing that well. I've only heard Fantastic Beasts is the only good one that's come out from that particular franchise. I mean, I've even heard that maybe they might be doing a what is it? Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. They might be trying to, like, get people from the original cast and stuff to come back and do that movie, because obviously it's been a couple of years, just a few years since the last Harry Potter movie.
Yeah, I think the last one was in 2011, so yeah, nearly 10 years.
Yeah, and I mean, that'd be a good time, because obviously the movie is set when Harry's a dad, and I don't know.
I saw the play, and yeah, it's not really a good story, but the whole point is it's a good stage show, but story not so much. But either way, yeah, interesting enough.
Well, I mean, but this is the thing, right? Like, with the power of J.K. Rowling, who has the ability to make it, what was the thing that she said? Like, wizards shit their pants and stuff like that, and on the street, that was a thing that they used to do before toilets. I'm not even joking. That's literally what she said. That's something they did. Why can't they just do more stuff? Like, look, I don't even care about Harry Potter, but I'm sure if I wanted to make money, I'd be milking the shit out of the Harry Potter franchise, because there's a lot of people who love that shit.
Yeah, it's still prevalent today, with the theme parks and things like that. So
everybody and their mother still, knows what Harry Potter is. So why not try and reintroduce that as a franchise? But we'll see. I don't know how far after the last, like, the Deathly Hallows is the Cursed Child based.
I think it's like maybe 15 years.
15? Oh, there you go. We're approaching 10. So why not just say that, Harry's 15 years older? Yeah. Easy peasy.
Yeah, done and dusted.
It's whether or not maybe you'd be able to get what is it? Hermione Granger to come back. I'm forgetting her actual
Emma Watson, because I think she's pretty much retired from acting. She's doing her own thing.
She's doing her own kind of like activism stuff. I don't even know what Ron is doing. He's probably just living off.
He does some acting in more UK stuff. I think he's in the UK version of Snatch. There's a UK TV show of the movie Snatched, and apparently he's pretty good in that.
Oh, okay.
But I haven't watched any of that stuff. So he's more local, and I think Daniel Radcliffe seems to be the only one who's kind of done more of the Hollywood stuff. It's always funny how that goes. I'm very curious of what the Star Wars people where they're gonna go. I think we've mentioned it before. It's like Oscar Isaac seems to be the only one who has a future.
A
I would say.
career. Yeah, going forward. Yeah, I mean, Boyega's probably going to just do his own kind of. Like, I think they were just going to go because they're all British. Are they all British? No, just Boyega and
Daisy.
Daisy Ridley,
Yeah.
right? Like those two are British. They can just go and do their own theater acting stuff, and never have to deal with Star Wars ever again, unfortunately. But hey, you know what? It'll be interesting to see what they say going forward about, what the state of things were. But yeah, just kind of wrap it up, like, yeah, I'm not really too sure if it's going to be any good, this whole like Flash movie and the Matrix stuff. But what I am confident in being good is the Joker, and it recently got nominated for a couple of Golden Globes. Which is really cool because obviously that gives it a pretty good sign that it's going to maybe and hopefully get some nominations for Academy Awards. Going forward, like that's what kind of these nominations set it out to be. So, in regards to the Joker, I believe it's gotten a few nominations, including Best Director, Best Actor, I think Best Film.
Best film. Well, yeah. I feel like it's rightfully so. I think obviously this movie had a lot of heat talking about it. The reviews about it and some very unfair reviews of it as well. And kind of like even just the pre I guess talk about this film about like it's going to inspire people killing other people, and I think that worked pretty much against their benefit because obviously we talked about it before. It's made $1 billion. This film.
It beat Aladdin.
It beat Aladdin.
Can you imagine?
Yes. And it just shows that it's such a cultural thing now that it's very much, and all the movies that came out this year, aside from Endgame, it very much feels like this is this had a very big cultural impact. Basically, we'll see Joker cosplays back again. This one.
Yeah. I mean, you're already seeing it now. Like you're seeing like heaps of people dressed up as it for Halloween. There were people who,
there are people who go to
the Hong Kong protest. Like there were people who were wearing the makeup there as well. Like
people go to the stairs and visit them in real life.
The Joker stairs, yes. I mean, look, ultimately, it is kind of like Joker really has kind of become is a bit of like an anarchist symbol within like the space of kind of protesting, and people like and like these people kind of use him to kind of be like, hey, we live in a society, damn it, so yeah, like it's good to see, but again, it's kind of good signs that hopefully it might win a few Academy Awards when the time.
Yeah, I think definite performance 100%. Like I feel like out of everyone this year, like Joaquin Phoenix is really known well in the Academy space. He at least should get a nomination. And I feel like literally every single other Joker, aside from Jared Leto, has been nominated for an Oscar for their performance. Like Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger. So, and this is one of the top ones. So I very much feel like if he didn't get nominated, there'd be something wrong. But yeah, he definitely deserves it, and I think this film deserves pretty much every single award that they get, and hopefully it gets nominated for more and actually wins. Because DC's basically been on a roll, I would relatively say, and what they're kind of doing, even though they don't really have a condensed plan of what they're doing. In general, I think we're just gonna move forward to our two main reviews of today. We're gonna be talking about Titans. Teen Titans, or well, they just call it Titans, and this is the second season of the DC universe shows. And basically it came out earlier this year. We kind of had first impressions. The season's finally wrapped up, and basically the whole premise of this show, I would say more or less, is just been talking about Deathstroke, and kind of Deathstroke's, I guess, family, and reforming the Titans and what that means, because essentially this is playing in a universe that's already established, and it's kind of moving forward from that, and and I feel like it doesn't have the origin feel to it, because obviously there's past history, and they just kind of go for what they need to do. So, but I feel like this season, compared to I feel like the first season we really enjoyed it. The second season, this season had, I think, a lot of potential, and it does explore some unique and interesting things, especially with a lot of the characters that they play with and introduce. But I feel like the last few episodes they very much falter, and I think that's the general feeling that I get from most people with this show.
Well, yeah, I think the problem is like Titans actually did a very similar thing that the first season did, right? Like, obviously the first season I think had like some of its ups and downs, like in the sense that, there were um, certain things that were really good that I really Robin and certain characters were cool, but then other characters they kind of weren't really too sure what they were going to do with the character who played Starfire, like she was kind of all over the place, almost like a completely different character. But then towards the end, the last episode they kind of left it on a cliffhanger, and the first episode of this season was essentially the actual like official finale for last season. It's even called Trigon, and it just kind of wraps up the previous season, which is essentially, Raven being like the avatar and the conduit for her demonic father Trigon into trying to, take over, Earth and the world in general. And they just kind of, sweep all of that over in the one episode and really quickly. And you can tell like there's like a big tonal shift as well. Like when you go to the second episode, it's almost like I heard there was some kind of talks like at the time that I think season two was confirmed when the first episode of Titans premiered. So it's almost like they weren't even too sure where the whether the show was going to get a second season or not.
Mm.
And I mean, look, after the whole thing that happened with Swamp Thing, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. That and that has led to the reason why it's kind of felt all over the place, and especially season two. Like I feel like the beginning of the season, like if you ignore the very first episode, the first half of season two is really good.
Yeah, it
Um,
establishes some new characters. It brings a lot more backstory of like the previous Teen Titans,
yeah.
and the previous relationship, which I feel like people needed some backstory. Because in the first season they didn't really touch upon what has happened, including introducing Bruce Wayne and as kind of like a mentor almost. So I feel like that's what they needed for the first few episodes. And then I think it shifted it kind of its focus on what it needed to do. And I'd say the it's not even just the first couple. I'd say more or less right near the end is when it lost its focus. But at the, at the top when they talk about
You see,
when they talk about what is Deathstroke's kids, for example Jericho, I really liked him and I really
mm-hmm.
liked his whole story. And that's like pretty much near the end of this season. I would say it was just right around the end is when I think it lost its, I guess, what it was doing.
Yeah, like there's a couple of really standout episodes. Like there's I think it's called Aqualad. It's basically about Aqualad and the previous team, and how eventually, little bit of spoilers. Aqualad gets assassinated inadvertently by Deathstroke, which kind of sets in motion this rivalry between the Teen Titans and Deathstroke. Which all kind of culminates in them trying to recruit Jericho into, which is Deathstroke's son, into trying to get to Deathstroke and use him against, Deathstroke as well. And yeah, like the Jericho episode, very good because again, we're seeing a lot more about what the previous team was like, and they did it in a very classic way that. That I really like in a lot of TV shows where you can just see the contrast, like the past, it's all bright and it's all colorful, whereas the present is all dark and depressing. There's obviously like color hues that are messed with. It's blue in the present, it's all bright in the past. And yeah, Connor, the episode centered around Superboy, was really cool as well, like him escaping Cadmus, which is it's really cool that Cadmus is back. I remember watching the animated TV series, and I think Superman is the one where it's also introduced as well. Cadmus being headlined and seeing all the shenanigans they get up to. Also in Young Justice as well. So it's cool to see that interaction and seeing more of Connor. But then, yeah, like it's true. The thing is, as the season kind of progressed, yeah, there's all this stuff that's happening is the problem is towards the end. Like I want to say maybe the last like 2 or 3 episodes, right? The last episode for sure there was a lot of problems, right? But a lot of the last couple of episodes just seem to be like, oh, all the team just scattered in different directions, and these episodes could have been used to try and push the plot further in terms of Deathstroke or Cadmus instead.
Mm.
While the kind of it all seemed kind of contrived in the sense like, oh, everybody split up, and then in the very last episode everybody got together, and then that's the reason why the final episode felt rushed. Like to me, as I was watching, I'm even was very self-aware. It's like, yeah, this show is ending like in a couple of episodes. Like, how are they going to be able to organically finish the Deathstroke story correctly? And then also, I thought they were going to leave like the Cadmus story on a like cliffhanger, right? Like, oh, they defeat Deathstroke, and like the team come together to try and all collectively take down Deathstroke, and then the season finale is, oh well, now they have to deal with Cadmus next season. But no, they literally resolved
In like an
both the
episode.
yeah, like half the episode was dedicated in taking out Deathstroke, which was a huge disappointment as well. Like, it was really clear that they kind of ran out of budget, and that's the reason why Starfire wasn't able to use her powers anymore, right? Like that. Obviously, the in-universe reason, oh, her sister did something or other, but it's like, oh, well, we got to make her useless, and therefore also give a justified reason as to why Dick has to be the one to fight Deathstroke.
Which,
Um,
by the way, at least we get our first live action Nightwing, which is like
that's true.
I at least applaud
That was
that. I'm like,
cool.
we actually finally got there. Let's hope for the third season they can do something more with it. But yeah, as you mentioned, it was very kind of disappointing, especially since considering that Deathstroke is basically the main villains of the Teen Titans, and we only really got this season. I feel like there's a lot of people that hate on that, but as kind of I preluded kind of before, I feel like this is kind of like it's like you could say the history of these characters existed in another time that we didn't get to kind of see.
I mean that's fine. Like in TV shows all the time, like we often get like flashbacks. Like I mean, Arrow is the first couple of seasons of Arrows are all about flashbacks.
Hey, like literally
When
every single season, aside from like the most recent one, has
I
basically
mean,
been
it's
all
come to the point that
flashbacks.
they're doing flash forwards in the later seasons, right? But like this is what I'm saying. Like I don't know. I don't think it's a big concern, but the main thing I think is the show looks good. I think all the characters look excellent. Like Raven's like looking more like her counterpart, like in the comics. Hawk and Dove obviously look great. We see Donna Troy properly wear her Wonder Girl costume. Um, I think we're just waiting. I think the only person who hasn't got their costumes, I think actually there's two of them. I think technically Beast Boy and Starfire haven't had their proper costumes yet, even though we have seen that Starfire has a costume, right? If
They
you
must
remember
have
where
got
she
rid of
said,
that as like a deleted scene somewhere. I would
yeah,
assume, and they're just like, yeah, we're not
and
going to do it anymore.
we're not going to do it anymore. And so it comes to question as to what changed. Like, why are they no longer? They must have filmed all this stuff and then been like, oh, hey, by the way, we're not doing this anymore. Maybe it's because they got confirmed for a season 3. Maybe it's because I don't know. There's a lot of weird meddling, and I think that's really affecting the show because I mean, like I said, like the first half of this show is really good. But then, like obviously, there's a lot of issues. I think, like with some of the pacing and the story components. Like I said, you know, the whole introduction of Cadmus, while cool, the whole point of having Superboy being used as a weapon, and then having Gar be like an artificial, a false flag attack that they're using to test the Superman weapon seems like really contrived. It almost doesn't make sense. Like, why not just use Superboy in like a controlled environment and just auction him off? Yeah, I don't know. It just seems really weird. Like as the point that Cadmus is playing in the show, and then they end up killing, quote unquote, Wonder Girl at the end of the season, and it
When
was
you say
really
killing, quote unquote, do you think she's actually alive?
no. I think they even say, um, well, at least Raven says that, oh, she's going back with them to the island because she wants to help or whatever. So and on Themyscira there is literally like a purple healing beam or something, a purple healing ray, which is like their kind of, ooh, just put them in the purple healing ray and they'll be okay.
That's the
Donna
Lazarus
Troy,
pit for you, you know.
well, yeah, but it's not the Lazarus pit. I think it's just like, I don't know, like some kind of godly divine power that heals wounds and stuff. And Wonder Woman goes there when she's hurt and shit. But I think the other thing is, Donna Troy is kind of known for having like a really disjointed origin story, like to the point that it's not really clear like exactly what is her origin, where does she come from, and she, because part of it is because she's died a few times and come back and stuff, and so I guess this is kind of like a nod to it as well. But I just felt that the way they went about it was really rushed, and
It was a
it
pretty,
really doesn't
to
make
be
sense.
honest, it was pretty lame. It's like
Oh, super lame. Oh, a
when
tower
someone like
fell down.
a tower falls down, she holds it and then she gets electrocuted and no one helps her and she just dies. I feel
Yeah,
like, and it's obviously they probably didn't find a way to write it, even though they could easily find a way that some
there
random
were
like soldier blew her up or something like that.
there was a lot of really weird scenes. Like obviously there was a scene where they're fight. Like okay, the fight between Supergirl and Superboy. Sorry, Wonder Girl and Superboy was pretty cool. I kind of liked that because it was like two heavyweights actually going up against each other and kind of being like, oh shit, like this is actually a person that can go toe to toe with me, right? Like that kind of was pretty cool for as short as that was. But then there was all these kind of weird moments in that particular scene where Dick Grayson throws like some kind of I don't know, like a flashbang or a smoke grenade, and then suddenly Superboy isn't there anymore, and he's talking to the team, and the next minute Superboy's back, and now they're jumping like several like meters to each other, there's like a weird like cut of them jump, like then suddenly coming close to each other and fighting, but then like I mentioned with Donna Troy holding up the massive I guess structure that falls down the tower or whatever. That was like a couple, like she would have had to jump like several meters to get to that. It's like, why isn't Superboy doing anything? Why isn't no one trying to prevent this? And then how did Dove get to that distance if they were so far away? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, there's a
it's
lot of
like
these
the
really,
logic of the battlefield where it's like you didn't feel exactly like
yeah.
why are you here, then all of a sudden you jump to here because
This is
there's
some
no
Game of
movement.
Thrones dragon traveling everywhere, like instant teleportation when convenient, and it really irked me. And again, it's such a shame given that the show actually did a pretty good job initially in regards to trying to keep things leveled and making sense. It's just really disappointing.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like
Ultimately.
we really like the new characters that we like that we had in all these in the journey right at pretty much till the end where it faltered. And
Hmm.
it's just like I'm very curious of what the next season's gonna be. I was there a tease for the third season, and I don't remember, but like
Ooh, I actually don't remember either.
but
There might be something. I mean, there's always like and the thing is, look, we know ultimately that we're gonna get a season 3 because it's been confirmed by DC, I think, through HBO Max or whatever it
and I
may
would
be.
assume this is like their main flagship title. Like what Doom Patrol is not their main flag title, and it's like yeah, Swamp Thing's gone, so that
Yeah,
this is
and
all you
like I
really got.
mentioned, like I mentioned, I think last week, they even said that I mentioned that it was like one of the most requested, one of the most in-demand streaming shows online. It was number two. The first one being Stranger Things, and then number three was Mandalorian, right? So clearly there is a lot of interest in regards to the show itself and where it wants to go moving forward. I think the only real thing that they kind of hint at is like Cadmus is obviously still around, and there's obviously some things that will go in that regards, but anything
I
going
feel like they're
forward,
gonna
who knows?
introduce their Lex Luthor like at some point because they talk about Lex kind of earlier in the season, so I'm assuming some sort of
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, yeah, well, that's the thing. They have, I guess, I'm assuming they haven't casted a Lex Luthor yet because I don't know, for whatever reason. Oh, actually, I remember now. So I think the thing that happens at the end is like all the Titans are finally together and it's like an operational team now. But then they show this black woman who I presumably got possessed by Starfire's sister. And he like ditches her. She like punches some dude and like leaves her children in the car, and you see her eyes going black or whatever.
Oh
Her
yeah.
sister's her sister's name being Blackfire, so obviously it's like a reference to that. Blackfire also being one of the new heroes on Justice League Odyssey, the comic book that's currently out, which is pretty cool as well. Because they're doing almost like a flip, right? Like almost in the sense like, if you think of the Justice League, but then all the Justice League get incapacitated, and then they're like kind of almost like their mortal enemies become like the new team to help like stop them or something like that. That's essentially what's happening in Justice League Odyssey. So Starfire has obviously become bad, so now Blackfire has been recruited to be the new like Starfire on the team. So
She's like, I
even though
guess.
they're not, yeah, it's like, well, that's not explicitly how they define her as being. Like that's essentially what is an analog to replace and like add a new dimension. Yeah, Justice League Odyssey would recommend. Pretty good. But yeah,
But
I
that's
mean,
like
Titans.
if we're talking about recommendations, I would definitely recommend like Titans. I feel like the good outweighs the bad in this type of situation.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're a fan of DC, go ahead and watch the Titans. If you like the first season, like it's more of the same. I think that's the thing. I don't think it, it it's gonna disappoint. I think the problem is like clearly they dropped the ball towards the end, whether it's due to like filming schedules or just writing or something. They just drop it. They drop it really hard towards the end. It's almost like they needed like a couple of extra episodes just to kind of wrap things up properly, but then they couldn't, right? I think the only kind of other thing I didn't like about the show is Bruce Wayne. I feel like the actor is obviously from Game of Thrones, Jorah from Game of Thrones or whatever, and he is more like an Alfred than a Bruce Wayne. And I wish they just cast him as Alfred instead, because he does literally sound like a British guy trying to do an American accent, but it just comes off as a British American accent, and it just is really jarring. It's like they should have just hired this dude to be Alfred instead. Yeah,
I can see that, and even then, it's like this Bruce Wayne is very different. I think this is the very like jaded Bruce Wayne, or like I guess, or from what like I guess what is it called? What Dick sees. He basically sees like him as a bad person type of thing. But it's like
I mean, and that's not too different from the comics either. Like the whole reason why Nightwing kind of leaves Batman is because, well, in the comics at least, is because he was wasn't really agreeing with the direction that Bruce Wayne was going, and he just couldn't be be Robin under him, and ultimately went on his own and became Nightwing. I like the origin of the Nightwing name better uh, in this series, because in the original comics, if I'm not mistaken, Nightwing is technically the name of a Kryptonian vigilante, who then Nightwing uses instead for his name. Nightwing and some, I think like Flamebird or something like that. That's like the like, I don't know, it's really esoteric knowledge, but that's what I believe it from. And then in this show, they kind of he originates it from like a kind of like a South American like legend or something, right? Like bird legend.
gotcha.
Then he adopt. It's much better than, oh, by the way, I took it from some space alien, vigilante. It comes off more organic in this series. So in that way, that part was kind of done right. There's a lot of really good stuff done okay. It's just like the other stuff is just like, oh, we're a team, and oh, we're not a team, and then we're having more of the stuff between Hawk and Dove. It's like, oh, we're together, but we're not good for each other, and I'm gonna do drugs.
Yeah, I
Like
feel
you
like
either do.
when you establish those problems, you do it once and then you figure out and it's kind of done. But I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah, like
it's kind of retreading old ground, and I feel like the characters should evolve and have something more to fight about, or be together as a unit. And I feel like
mhm.
moving forward, we definitely don't want to see like for example Dick Grayson leaving the group being like I'm not good enough anymore, and no more of that. Like he's found himself, he's done.
Yeah, let's not do any more
He's
of
not
that
wing
kind of
now, so
stuff.
let's drop it and let's do something different. And I feel like that's
Yeah,
what
it's
they need
like
to move.
yeah, it's like what are they trying to be? CW, huh?
They're
But I think that's a
retreading
good
old ground.
what? Just doing all this weird drama stuff. But I think that's a good segue to kind of move on and talk about the Crisis on Infinite Earths event that's actually happening on CW at the moment. So
Basically, our Earth is like gone, apparently, because all Earths are gone.
I think technically Earth, yeah, I guess Earth One. Oh, spoilers. Earth One dis.
Let's be
But
honest. If you went all the way over here and then you were talking about the Crisis stuff, it's spoilers. But like, yeah, it's
yeah,
spoilers.
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's uh, it's really interesting to kind of see all of this finally kind of coming to fruition, and also the direction they're going in. Because even I didn't. Again, I try not to like kind of hyper analyze things that I like because if I do, I typically tend to find like how they're going to resolve certain things more easier. If you think too much about it and you think about the way that a show is produced and the kind of story beats, you can kind of figure out, okay, yeah, this new character that they introduced this season is definitely the bad guy, right? Like, that's because that's going to be the big reveal because it's like, oh, well, they introduced this character
And
and
who
there's
else?
some villain who
Like,
we don't know the
who else
identity.
would this character be?
Yeah, exactly. They do it all the they do it all the time on Arrow and stuff, right? But actually, the one big thing that they actually changed in Titan season 2 is they didn't have the typical the Judas contract is a kind of classic Teen Titans story where essentially Deathstroke uh, has basically a mole in the Titans group, but the person who is the mole is different this time around. It's his daughter, whereas in the comics it was, I believe, I'm forgetting the name. It's actually escaping me right now, but Tara, who Gar has a romantic interest in, and she eventually betrays the group, and is working for Deathstroke. In the comics, I think she has like an actual sexual relationship with Deathstroke, but they've I think semi-retconned that because she's technically underage. Oh boy, but
Yeah,
not really,
so
not
spicy.
that weird. I mean, look, honestly, it's not that weird for somebody like Deathstroke to do that, but obviously they've kind of made Deathstroke like over time a little bit more of a uh, he's still a bad dude. He kills people and shit, but he's a little bit more of a good guy. And so they kind of moved away from that. But this time around, instead of having his daughter Rose Wilson play the kind of the mole in the show instead. So I kind of like the change, even though I knew that probably was what was going to happen. I like that it was a variation of that rather than me
Completely
all
going
like
for it.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's kind of typical. In a way, when you're kind of familiar with the genre and the stories, it's kind of hard to trick someone into what you'll know, and what you want to do with the characters. But I think they did it in a pretty good way this time around.
Mm.
But anyway, to kind of go back to all the Crisis events. What do you? I guess to just kind of summarize it. Essentially, the Crisis on Infinite Earths event is, there's infinite parallel universes, different superheroes. In the world of CW, certain characters are set in actually different Earths. For example, Supergirl, I think, is Earth 38, whereas the mainline CW shows like Arrow, Flash, and Batwoman is set on Earth 1. And essentially, there's a universal threat that is destroying all life and all reality. And the team are all coming together to try and stop the event from occurring. And that's essentially what the Crisis event is.
Mm.
What do you think of the event so far? So there's been 3 episodes released. The first episode being on Supergirl, Batwoman, and the Flash.
Yes, and the next
And
two will be
technically
in the
Black,
next year.
and yeah, which is so weird, right? A month later, I can't believe they blue ballsing us like that. The Black Lightning technically has like it's not necessary watching material, but it does have a episode that is dedicated to being at least connected to the Crisis event. Essentially, yeah, I don't think you've watched it, Don, but I have. Essentially, uh, the one of Jefferson's daughters, who's got like the lightning abilities too. During the whole event, like with all the sky turning red, she ends up kind of vibrating and seeing alternate realities where she's like a bad guy and did like based on these decisions of what's happening in the show, and she's trying to figure out like what is it I should do, and how do
Mm.
I not become like these variations of myself. And then Jefferson obviously gets taken out of reality, and put into the current line of the story. So what do you think about the event so far?
So far, I think it's pretty good. Obviously, this whole thing is more or less just fan service.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's so many callbacks to certain different things, even like at the start of everything. Um, we had the guy who played Robin in the 1960s Batman. We had the Tim Burton Batman theme play.
Hmm.
Um, even the original Superman theme
even
play.
even even the Titans, like I mean, they had like the Robin and I think Hawk make like they look up in the sky and the sky turns red or something, and that's like kind of like done as a throwaway. Yeah, there's a lot of reference. Yeah, there's a reference to the Birds of Prey TV show from the, I
Like
want to say, 2000s.
2001, yeah, around
Yeah,
there.
something like that. Yeah, the original actress who played Black Canary, she's like running around and it's like, oh, we can't stop the whatever, and yeah, her Earth gets destroyed. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff that's happening in the show. You know what I wasn't aware of. So we're having Brandon Ruth come back as playing his titular role as Superman.
Yes.
Now the thing that like I kind of wasn't aware of is that obviously Superman Returns is technically a sequel to Superman 1 and 2 by Reeves, right?
Yes,
But
it's like a weird connection tissue thing.
well, yeah, it's really funny because because even in the episode, I think that's in the Batwoman episode, if
Yes, it
I'm
was
not
in the
mistaken.
second episode.
There's obviously a reference to, he talks about how, Lex Luthor comes in and he makes Superman, the Tyler Hoechlin Superman, fight Brandon Routh's Superman. And he even says, "Oh, don't worry, that's not the first time I've fought myself." And that's actually technically a reference to, I think, either Superman 3 or 4. And Returns technically happens after Superman 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he even references his son, Jason, who's the name of the son in Superman Returns. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre because I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So like the continuity is like kind of all over the place, but it's really cool because obviously you then see like the death of a lot of people who worked at the Daily Planet and stuff. Uh, I think episode 2 has probably been my favorite episode, but that's because you have like a lot of the big guns playing uh, the original titular roles, right? You have, as I mentioned, Brandon Roos playing like an alternate version of Superman, and you
Yeah,
also
Tom
have the
Welling.
original. Oh yeah, Tom Welling is also in it. Oh, and that was great too. The thing is, I never read the comics for Smallville. I watched the TV show, but in the TV show, that's when I think in the comics he like gives up his power, and that's why. Because I had no idea. Like, hey, I don't remember that happening in the TV show.
Yeah,
And
the TV show
Lex
ended with
Luthor,
he finally got on the suit and he just flew in space and that was kind of it. So I'm assuming
yeah,
there was
yeah,
a continuation like CW does in the
yeah,
comics,
yeah,
and
and
it's like
yeah, even Lex
even
Luthor becoming president was
yeah
in the comics. Yeah,
yeah, and even I didn't know that, and I feel like that's kind of like a bittersweet kind of ending almost, where it's like he gave up his powers, he's not super, and he's just there raising his kid. Um, yeah, it's like we didn't get to see him in the suit, but at least he was there, and at least he was game to be in it. I felt like that was more than enough.
yeah, and I mean, I think the thing is like he still looks the same, and he's still as like buff as he was like back in the show too. So it was really like it was very believable. I think it was more funny just seeing how like in certain realities, Superman is recognizes like well certain characters recognize each other, right? But then in other realities they don't. in the Smallville universe, he doesn't recognize that the CW version of Lex Luthor is Lex Luthor. He's just like, you're not Lex Luthor. It's like Lex Luthor doesn't have a goatee, damn it. But yeah, but whereas we see the what is it, Batwoman and Supergirl go into I think it's Earth 99, and they meet Batman of the Future, which is played by Kevin Conroy, who is literally the voice of Batman.
Like, if you've heard Batman in any type of form, it's basically his voice. Like, it's him.
Yeah. And it's obviously like kind of like an off reference to Batman Beyond. The one thing that I was interested in seeing, because we initially see Luke, who is Luke Fox, at his mansion, and I thought, oh, maybe they're doing some kind of Luke becomes like Batman Beyond, like the Batman of the future, but they kind of didn't go that far. And the big twist is, oh, actually, this version of Batman's actually a bad guy. Like, he actually killed Superman, killed all his villains, I think, and all that kind of. That was like the big plot twist. But it was also really cool to kind of see him, obviously Kevin Conroy, kind of doing the classic voice and seeing it come out of him. But at the same time, it's like a sinister version of Batman. He even quotes, I think, Batman v Superman. Because he even talks about like aliens coming out of the sky and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was very much like what Ben Affleck's Batman was kind of saying, where it's like, yeah, you're gonna take out the threat.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of really cool things. The second episode's been really great. Even the first episode, like we initially see, obviously, Oliver Queen sacrificing himself. A lot of it was like kind of jumping around, and yeah, there's a lot. There's so much going on, and it's all very hard to kind of condense down unless you've watched like all 5 or 6 different shows. Like, I think it's a 6-parter ending with Legends of Tomorrow. Like, I'm assuming it's going to premiere like Legends of Tomorrow and continue that show, which I have no idea how that show is going to do anything. But yeah, like it's kind of bizarre. But with the episode of The Flash, they were trying to bring back Oliver from the dead after he presumably died. But then we also see the Spectre, who is essentially like the entity who represents God, like with a capital G. In the DC universe, it's like kind of represents his vengeance and stuff like that. And the thing is, if you look at the Spectre, if you Google him, he has a green hood. Who else has a green hood?
Oh, I don't know, man. It's like the Green Arrow almost has one as well.
Yeah. In the original Crisis on Infinite Earth, the Spectre actually goes hand to hand and fights along with other heroes against the Anti-Monitor, who's the main villain this particular crossover. So I think the way with the sudden introduction of Jim Corrigan, who was the previous person who represented the entity, the Spectre. I think the way that they're going to kind of give, Arrow and Stephen Amell his kind of final send-off is by making him like the embodiment of like vengeance and like justice, which is the Spectre. Well, I don't know if the Spectre represents justice. He definitely represents vengeance. But even in the latest Detective Comics, I think maybe 1012, they actually had the Spectre talking to, or like interacting with Batman, and like the thing that it says on the title, it says, "You have failed this city." So I was like, oh, so they set it up that far
back. It's a cross-reference, guys.
Which I kind of found funny, but I think like, yeah, if they end up making...
and also they introduce like they bring back Constantine and things like that, so maybe there's a thing. I don't know what's going on, because like, honestly,
I think the big thing that will happen is Oliver will become the Spectre, and he'll kind of be, and it kind of makes it a good way to kind of have him like justifiably fight against a godlike entity like the Anti-Monitor, and then at the same time, I think the events of the Crisis events will lead to there being one world initially, right? Because that's essentially what happened in Crisis. Like, DC kind of thought, oh, we had all this kind of shit happening and nothing's really consistent. Let's all just blow everything up and make it into one big thing. You know, Supergirl will no longer be on Earth 38. She'll just be on New Earth, which is what they initially called it before, I think, Infinite Crisis, when they reintroduced the concept of the multiverse and there being only 52 alternative Earths. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see whether they follow the 52 thing or whether they go on and do like the multiverse. I mean, DC's kind of flip flopped in regards to what they want to do and what they don't.
I feel like it's obviously like a thing where they're just like, can we do it? And someone else is like, yes, but then someone else is like, yeah, no. So
I
I
mean,
feel
personally, I always thought it was a really weird, like, not weird, but I understood the decision as to why, they separated Supergirl in her own planet, because then it's like, oh, why doesn't she just get Batwoman or the Flash to help her or whatever? But, essentially with this, they will probably put everybody in the one world and then make the alternate versions have their own kind of worlds again. I think that's what's probably going to happen.
yeah, you can't just get rid of
Um,
all those worlds because that in itself just makes everything relatively tragic, in a way. It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like, hey, all those the old CW shows that you liked, then they're all dead. Like, especially
Yeah, yeah,
obviously since they showed the Titans, like they can't just be like, oh, that world doesn't exist anymore,
yeah,
and then
exactly. I think
continue with the TV show.
it's probably going to be like, oh, Supergirl from Earth 38, like, in order to make the universe stronger, we're going to combine your world with Earth 1 along with like whatever other Earths that they are going to justify, and then that's going to lead to the big spin-off shows because they've confirmed like a Green Lantern, which I think is going to be a CW show, and then
They got the
Stargirl,
Star Girl.
Stargirl,
Yep.
Booster Gold, apparently. Like, I don't know how they're doing a Booster Gold show. Like, that's essentially like Legends of Tomorrow, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, time travel, yeah, it's really weird. Um, and yeah, and they're not afraid to like new characters as well. They had, I think, Dr. Choi, I think that's his name, like Andrew Choi. Like, he's essentially the second Atom. Well, he becomes a second Atom, and he represents like humanity in like in their journey to try and find paragons. I like the big twist at the end of episode 3 as well, where Lex Luthor like writes himself in the prophecy instead of Superman. I thought that was pretty smart way to kind of like mess with like the story and
Mm.
as a plot twist.
Because yeah, the whole and not only that, but I'm assuming because the whole thing of the monitor just basically is like everything has a purpose and place. So it's kind of like it's almost like, yeah, I don't want to compare it because it's like, but it's more or less just the Doctor Strange moment in Infinity War where it's like everything has a purpose
Oh,
and a place and everything is kind of like followed to this path almost. Like
mm-hmm.
for example, like when he says, oh yeah, the Flash is gonna die. Um, obviously it's not Barry Allen, it's the older Flash from
Oh,
the
you see, I
'90s.
kind of honestly, I kind of found that a bit of a cop, right? Because it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the implication is it's supposed to be Barry Allen. Like, why would someone else care that a Flash from another universe died? You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like, it just seems like a
Yeah,
really
obviously
weird.
they were supposed to like trick the audience at being like, "Hey, it's gonna be Barry Allen," and then this is when he disappears, but he doesn't. But then there has to be something because that article still gets written, yeah, like about him
Yeah, I mean,
disappearing.
oh yeah, by the way, a Flash from an alternate universe sacrificed himself so the world would survive. Which in the end, it didn't end up. He didn't end up like he saved everyone, albeit temporarily, because everybody ends up kind of getting vaporized anyway.
And they're in
But yeah,
the what do they call it? It's not Elseworlds or whatever it is. It's like the world between worlds. I don't know
oh
much about
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff in comics, like in the DC comics where they are and what
Oh
they're doing.
well, I
Because I don't
well,
really I honestly don't really have a theory of what they're trying to do with this next.
I think essentially they bring back in Legends of Tomorrow in the first season um is is set in a area called the I think it's like the end of time, and that's where like the observers of time travel and stuff interacted, and that's where Rip was trying to deal with it in the first season of Legend of Tomorrow, that is.
Mm.
And yeah, and essentially they're back there, and they're trying to probably have to figure out, oh yeah, we have to use time travel to fix things, and maybe they might go back to iconic moments like in the series, much like in Endgame, by the way. Uh, it's kind of shaping out to like this whole big crossover is kind of like this like DC's and that's what it is, like CW, the TV series are essentially DC's equivalent of TV equivalent of like the Marvel movies. Like they've taken their time to build up the world and have people invested in what's going on and understanding like certain references and certain events and interactions. You know, it's the same thing that's happened in, Endgame, same thing that's happened, and Infinity War, same thing that we're having here. Funny to see that both of the movies and the TV shows include infinite or infinity, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's just purely because of the comics, because they're all based on that. It's like, man, you couldn't just use like a, I don't know, is there a better way than infinite? Like,
No, I just find it interesting that like
yeah, I know they're
both of
very
the
similar, and
big
they're both
events.
like shaping events, and they all have crossovers. I think it's like, yeah, I very much like this is why DC and Marvel are very close together when it comes to these type of things, and everyone's like which one came first, whatever it may be. But other from that, do you have like any kind of like character moments that you like and things like that? I do like how like they're very much self-aware. It's like, oh, this we're not doing crossovers anymore for the Legends of Tomorrow. Like they're self-referencing that, or like there's a lot of like random stuff like that in what they're doing with the characters, or even
Yeah,
like
I mean,
I don't watch Lucifer, but I think that was Lucifer, the random other English guy who was talking to
ye-
Constantine.
yeah. It is. Well, I mean, he even says that. But yeah, it's from the TV show. I haven't watched the TV show either, but apparently it's based like before the TV series.
Uh-huh.
Because obviously, I think in the TV series it's about Lucifer, kind of redeeming himself and being a good person again, right? Or like, well, I guess ruling hell again. But yeah, let's see. I kind of liked how Leonard Snart, like they have like a version of the Wave Rider, and it's Leonard Snart, who's the AI of the ship. Uh,
Yeah, it's like because I'm assuming he's busy doing his own thing, so it's like, okay, just send us some voice clips and do your thing. So at
yeah,
least he's kind of there in presence.
yeah. Like mostly, I kind of just like the character interactions. Like we had Superman interacting with Superman, but then you also had the Atom Brandon Ruth interacting with Brandon Ruth Superman. It's like, huh, you two look the same. And Kara walking into the room and it's like, man, you got really buff. And it's like, no, that's actually your cousin. Like chill out. Yeah, like it's one of those things that's like pretty good, like just kind of seeing these kind of small character moments, because that's usually what you see in the comics as well. Like obviously the big event in Justice League, you had the Justices, like there's a lot of time traveling that's happening, and you have like the modern Justice, like some of the modern Justice League people going back in time and interacting with the Justice Society, but then you have like some which went into the future that are dealing with essentially what's called DC 1 million, and it's like set 1 million years into the future. There was like a comic book event that centered around that particular group of superheroes that was actually pretty good. I remember I read it a couple of years ago now.
That was the
And
New 52 thing, wasn't it? I think because I
no,
think
no,
I
no, no, DC 1 million. So if you look at that, it's set 1 million years into the future. So you have like a like Batman's descendant being Batman in a different version of what is it, Superman, and then you have like a robot version of Wonder Woman. Like there's all these kind of like characters from that story. Now they're the ones who are interacting with a future, like with the modern version of the Justice League. So in very much a similar way, like those interactions in the comics are kind of what we're seeing in the TV show as well. Very much in the same way, like of the classic comics where the crisis events is you're having Superman interacting with Superman, and Batman interacting with Batman and all that. So yeah, it's cool to see on TV. Obviously, it's the quality is like CW. So if you obviously don't like that kind of show, you're not gonna jump into this understanding. And there is obviously story plot elements that are just kind of like, ugh, what are you doing? I remember, I think, like, what is it? The Green Arrow shot an arrow at the Monitor in the very first episode, and it's like, why would the Monitor let him
why would
like
he
shoot
let you
an
do
arrow
that?
at him and electrocute him? Like, it's just kind of bizarre. But obviously, like, it's done for plot reasons, but I can obviously overlook that because there's all this other kind of cool stuff that's happening at the same time.
Yeah, and I can't
Yeah, I've
believe
been
we have to
enjoying the
wait.
event. Yeah, I think that's the big egregious thing, is that we have to wait like January, like late January or something, or
Yeah,
mid January.
it's like this time January.
Yeah.
The real question is like I was when I heard the original Tim Burton Batman theme, I'm like, I wonder if they got like Michael Keaton to actually be Batman, but we still got Kevin Conroy Batman. But It would be kind of cool to have that Batman, but you know,
Well, I don't know if they have the money to just have those kind of people. And like even Kevin Conroy is just like he just probably gets employed as Batman at DC, so they can just call him like, hey, can you just call like today we actually have something for you? Can you come in and just be Batman for us? And I was like, yeah, sure. Personally, I'd love to see a Batman Beyond TV series and having him play like a future version of Bruce, and then having someone play the actual Batman Beyond character. But hey, look, maybe we might get that. Don't want to jinx myself. We might actually see that going forward. But yeah,
there's
that's
a lot of things these days where like, oh, then this cool comic or something, they'll never make that into a live action thing, and then we always get surprised when they announce something like that.
yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll see going forward what they want to do with it. Hopefully, they'll fix like a lot of the issues that certain other TV shows are having. Like, obviously, I think the thing that Crisis on Infinite Earths will do is it will give writers of the show the ability to retcon certain events. Um, for example, like if the plot of Leviathan in Supergirl is really boring, they can just change the name or change the main actor or change this or that. And same thing with like Batwoman. Like maybe if like they don't have a reason for why Batman went missing, they might have one now because it's like, oh, this is the reason why.
Mm.
And maybe he might come back. Like, yeah, it'll give them like a little bit of like a breathing room to kind of retcon certain things and fix up the show's kind of obviously large, almost like what is it, 9-year history for some of them, Arrow in
Yeah,
particular.
pretty much. Like
Um,
it's very long, and not only that, but I feel like, I guess DC and Warner Bros in general are being a little bit more generous when it comes to the CW stuff. Um,
mhm,
like not only just having Superman there, but having Lex, having the initial of like if just a Batwoman there. Like I feel like they're a little bit more looser, and they're just more like, yeah, we'll put stuff on the CW, as you can see. So I feel like they've got a little bit more to play with, and it kind of reminds me of like, I think I remember hearing an interview, for example, like with something like Gotham. I remember in the first season they're just like, yep, you can't even talk about Harley or anything like that, or Joker, and obviously they touched upon
sure.
these certain things every time. So I feel like with the CW stuff, they're at least having more connective tissue, I guess, of just instead of just being like really restrictive of what you can and can't do, they're a little bit more, I guess, better at it now. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah, I agree.
and that's kind of like what they're doing in the future, and who knows what they're gonna do. Obviously maybe they'll announce that like there's a Flash TV show that's gonna be on the, maybe it's not gonna be on CW anymore, but it's gonna be on the DC network with a higher budget. I have no idea, but it would be really interesting. But aside from that, we basically just have to wait another month. But they'll finally resolve things, and it's probably gonna be a big thing until that point. Um, but yeah, this is gonna be us for this week. Just a reminder, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, on our website Libsyn, and on our YouTube channel Marketing Movies. Just type in Pancake Parlay and you'll find us there. So until next time, Henry Cavill is going to appear in this show, but his budget's probably enough for like a whole season. So until next time, see ya.
Gotcha.